Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of The Crystal Cocoon. We are your hosts, Brandon Lapierre and Jesse Dejari. For this episode, we'll be talking about a little controversial program, the Secret Space Program, Blue Avians, the secret government, breakaway human civilizations. There's a big thing going on right now as far as whistleblower disclosure with someone that we've mentioned before on a couple other shows, Corey Goode.
I said it Goode before. Sorry, everybody.
We got on the Goode kick, but I think it's actually Goode, Corey Goode. Goode, if you want to look it up yourself. But
why can't it be Goode? Sorry. It's the dyslexia in my brain. It's like wants to read it
Don't
differently.
blame that on dyslexia.
Oh, come on.
Come on. Be real. I think, didn't we talk about being honest with yourself and introspection?
Okay, fine.
Okay.
I just can't read. I just can't read, that's all. I can admit it. This is my truth telling. I've been faking it for so long.
Yeah.
We do have a question of the week, though.
Yes, we do have a question of the week. Carrie from our Conversations from Carrie episodes asked a question about the contrast being observed and experienced globally. So why is the world experiencing so much fear and hate while at the same time we're going through this significant change in becoming more enlightened beings? And I think that's like a really good question because
it's a great question.
A lot of people, they'll look at and get drawn into the state of the world and think that everything is going to hell in a handbasket.
Right.
But
you can find lots of proof if that's the perspective that you're looking for.
Right. You can find lots of proof to back up your theory because it's everywhere.
Yeah.
But on the same note, you could find just as much proof the other way about how things are changing and how people are coming together. And then the fact that we know about so much more, know about so much more of what's going on. We're living in an information age where it's not being swept under the rug.
An information overload age.
That's true too. But yeah, you can look in our history of government disclosed documents and going back to way back when, and look at all the secret programs and the psyops and all these different things that were kept from us, and how the people have been lied to. But right now, with all the whistleblowers, all the people that are hacking and disclosing, and the government tries to paint these individuals as terrorists, tapping into their information and releasing it publicly. But really, I don't look at them as terrorists at all. They're really just providing us a service because we're asking for more transparency, and that's what we're being given. And in order for us to move past what we've had to what we want, we have to be honest of what's really happened. We have to be informed of what's been going on. We can't just ignore it and pretend like it's going to go away. So in the process of letting go of some of the shadow, it's kind of a similar process that we have on the individual spectrum. When you become uncomfortable with things in your life, when you become uncomfortable and start to get triggered, it's the time to look in and reflect on what's actually being triggered. So you can scale that up to more of a sociological perspective on what's been happening within our society and in each different government. And what feels uncomfortable, it's coming to light so that it can be changed. Some of the things are still happening. We've got the terrorist attacks that just happened in France, and terrorism and different things being sprung up all over. But it's not just an isolated event that happened in France. There's the genocide that happened in Syria, and then
right.
It's all over. It's been going on for a very long time. They only put the light on the things that they want you to see, and that's
because it reinforces the viewpoint they want you to hold, which is to be afraid.
Right. And so some of the things that David Wilcock and Corey Goode we'll talk about is like really what's happening is they're having their last hurrah. You know, they're really hanging on with all that they can, and the money has been it's slowly starting to shift away from the powers that be and slowly creating the powers that were. And you can see this in France, where the riots are happening, protests, and the terrorism activities, because they've done things like they burnt down a Monsanto research facility, they banned GMOs, and so slowly, as people start waking up to these corporatocracies. Like Monsanto's been slowly losing at least 30% yearly.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. So it's because of these things slowly shifting away from corporate control, because we do live in here in America and in many parts of the world in a military-industrial complex. It's something that's been warned about from Woodrow Wilson. I don't remember when he was president, but when he was president, it was he warned about this because he saw what was coming. He saw the shifting of ages into corporate control and corporate-backed government.
Right.
But in order for that to change, we need to have lights on the situation, and the people in charge are really struggling to keep afloat by creating all the situations that control our minds. And that's really the only way they can control us, is by controlling our minds first.
Well, I also feel like, I remember one thing that popped into my head while you were saying that was we went to a Michael Moore talk of probably like around 6 or 7 years ago. And it was right after, it was shortly after the bowling for Columbine. And then he did another talk about something different, a little different from that. But one of the things he said is, this is the sound of the dying dinosaurs dying.
Yeah.
And he was talking a lot about how you just watch as these awarenesses come about, and that shifting continues as people continue to have more awareness and less tolerance for this sort of behavior. The cries of these dying dinosaurs, of these old institutions and old systems, are going to get louder and louder. And it kind of, to me, it's like if we're all on a great big shaker plate and we're trying to sort things out. As people are deciding to stop following the news and stop participating in the fear-based culture, there's less of them participating. So there's less of an audience. So it becomes louder because there's less things to kind of dampen it with reason. So now what's left is all of these, explosive conversations, explosive topics. And because we as a culture are so obsessed with right now news, right now information, reporters aren't backing up their facts. They're not backing information up before releasing stories anymore, because it's about releasing them now, and being immediate, and they can edit it later.
And it's an editorial.
It is an editorial. It's not factual anymore.
Editorials than facts, yeah.
By far. I mean, Fox News, they only actually have 2 news programs that take I think it's like an hour in the morning at 5 a.m. and another hour in the evening at 10 or something. And all the rest, that's all editorial. But they don't say the editorial news. They say the news and, and morning news and whatever.
And much of it is very emotionally charged and
it is.
swayed.
It's explosive and full of language that's designed to create fear. My son, a few years back, he was terrified that we were going to die. He just became completely fixated on it, and he was afraid that we were both going to die, and he couldn't stop thinking about it. And finally I said, "Why are you thinking about this? Why do you even think this is true?" And he goes, "Well, look at all the movies and the books. The kids' parents always die, and then the kid's always alone." Well, this is also a part of what's going on. Nobody wants to sit and read a book about a little boy who, he got up in the morning and his mom made him breakfast and he walked to school and he had a good day at school and he came home from school and his mom was there. And then his dad came home from work and then the next day started and it started all over. No one wants to read that. That's boring. We want to read what's exciting. We want to read about, his parent, Lemony Snicket's, his parents, they, died in horrible crash and burned to death. And now they're stuck with some horrible, caretaker. So news is what's engaging, what's interesting, what's going to get people paying attention. And that's, to all of us, is tragedy because it makes us feel better about our lives. We don't have that tragedy. So if we really want to start, seeing a shift, shifting away from the idea that, yes, there are scary things happening in the world. Yes, there is tragedy, there's murder, there's violence. But the more we focus on that, we are feeding our energy into it. And so we have to just continue to shift away.
Well, it also doesn't mean ignore either.
No.
So it's not focusing on it doesn't mean ignoring it. Not focusing means not dwelling on it and letting that idea consume you.
Yes.
Don't be consumed by fear, but be aware of what's going on so that if you have the opportunity to change something, then you can take it with an educated mindset,
and
with an informed mindset.
Yeah, because you're not afraid.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then, so that's the only way to create change is to be aware of what's going on. So it's important to not just look at these mainstream media outlets. It's important to look at the alternative news and follow the money, follow the politics, follow everything that leads back, and or at least follow somebody who's done the research and can give you sources to cite to do that, because there's so much convolution out there as far as the information being presented. And it's really hard sometimes to know what's true.
Right.
And that kind of gives me kind of a leadway into the rest of the talk. And how do you know what's true and what you're hearing?
Which is critical, having discernibility, being able to discern the truth.
It is very critical. And so people who are empathic, people who are intuitive have a segue into that. But it's more than that. You also have, I think body language is important. Being a good a body language reader, being a good subtle reader of people's movements in order to kind of discern truth from fiction, truth from what's being presented. Whether you're talking about like a presidential candidate, or you're talking about a whistleblower, I think it's important to note some of these things. So one of the best things that I can see as far as true is how it feels in your body, how it feels when this person is speaking. And it may not necessarily be all factual information, but if you can get a sense from the person that they really believe what they're talking about, that's a good place to start. I've listened to a lot of whistleblowers over the years give presentations about different informational talks, and some of it's very emotionally charged. Some of it's like they always they throw something at you, and it's very heightened. And I don't trust those. I don't often trust a lot of those, because you can look at like Hillary Clinton's tactics. What she does is she tries to invoke a response, and she has this kind of fake smile that she gives, and all her emotions are very cued. They teach politicians how to react in certain things. And they teach some disinformationists how to present information to where it's believable. They actually get acting classes. So how do you know? One thing I really liked about Corey Goode is that when you're looking at him, you get this sense of genuineness. You get this sense of when you look in his eyes, he's not BSing you. He's not.
Well, he's not invested in you believing in him.
Yeah.
He doesn't need you to believe.
No.
He knows it's true.
Right.
So there's no aspect of his talk with you. You don't hear in his language trying to convince.
Right.
And if that's another piece of it too. If somebody is trying to convince you, it's like you have that friend who's like, I would never lie to you.
The other thing too is he's not presenting himself the man that has all the answers.
No.
And that's important too. And he doesn't evade questions. He doesn't evade facts. He doesn't evade and create a story around it because he thinks he has to be the expert.
No,
if
he just says he doesn't know.
He's like, I can't really give you answer to that question because I don't know. What I can tell you is hearsay according to what I read on these little tabs that I was reading that has all this information. What I can tell you is what I saw. And so that's another thing. So he's flat out honestly giving an honest perspective from his point of view when he's answering a question, and that's important. When you hear politicians answer questions, that's what I also like about Bernie Sanders. He'll address the question that's answered or that's asked. He'll answer the question that's asked, and he'll say, "Well, what you're saying is this." what you hear mostly with a lot of politicians is they'll do workaround answers. They'll get you really emotionally hyped around the workaround, and it won't even address the question or the issue at hand. And that's a common tactic they use. They're trained to do that. So that's one thing I like about Bernie. That's another thing I like about Corey Goode. That's why I think he's a very important piece to the whistleblower community and the getting the truth out there about the secret space program.
Well, and the other thing you always have to have is common sense.
Right.
You have to bring your own common sense into the equation. You have to be grounded in who you are and what you know, but you also have to look at the difference between what this person is saying and what you're experiencing and to be true. So one of the things that I also appreciate about Corey Goode, God, I think it should be Goode.
Well,
anyway,
I don't know how he feels about that.
I know, we need to ask him. But one of the things that I do appreciate about him is that when he is speaking, he is using common sense in the way he is interpreting what he's experiencing.
Right.
So he's applying these things too, and so you can connect with him that way also. But when you listen to, there's some people that I've listened to that talk about the concept, and it gets into like things that defy common sense or things that would not make sense for a person to interact that way, or what, like for instance, Corey Goode was talking about how there was this big conflict between the humans and in the space program and the extraterrestrials, and how the humans wanted a certain response from the extraterrestrials as a result of an attack that had happened. And so that fits in with human nature.
Right.
That is how humans behave. We want justice. We want revenge. That's how we react to things. That's how we're reacting right now to the bombing. We want revenge. We want to know who's responsible, who's to blame, and who do we punish. And, so I can appreciate that. And then you get into other people that aren't looking at it that way.
Well, if it fits right in, like some of the information he's giving fits right in with some of the conspiracy theories and programs that have been talked about for a while
years,
now.
Yeah.
One of the things in particular,
it gives logic to them.
Right. So one of the things in particular, you just mentioned that there was some sphere of light, some UFO craft out there, and there was a base down in Australia that shot up this beam weapon at it, and it returned the fire and it destroyed the base.
Sweet.
It shot it back down and it returned it and it destroyed this base. And it wasn't exactly, but they weren't attacking. They didn't go out and attack. It's just like, okay, we shielded ourselves. It shot back down, and that's that. And that's not the response they were hoping for. They were hoping to invoke violence from them.
To prove that they're something to fight against.
Right, even though that the humans were the aggressors.
Right.
This goes right in line with the Project Bluebeam. Are you very familiar with
No.
Bluebeam? So Bluebeam was an idea that we were being prepped for a very long time for a fake alien invasion.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I forget, was it Reagan who was talking about like the threat of an outside force will unite us.
Reagan was very focused on space wars.
He was. Well, he had it in his journals. He's the one that had in his journals notes from non-terrestrial officers and gave names and exchange information from these different officers in the non-terrestrial program. So obviously that leads into like a space program, a secret space program. So that's another thing too, how can you correlate some of the information going on? Some of the information, like you have to look very big picture. You can't look at it at the bullet point of what's being presented. You have to look at the whole thing. So the fact that the government has been funding for a very long time alien invasion movies.
Right.
Why is that?
Why?
Well, it goes right along with the Project Bluebeam. And so there's been some whistleblowers talking about them actually preparing this fake alien invasion so that we would give more of our power away, and they would gain more control. It would unite the world under this controlled mechanism. And so if they were trying to invoke this alien attack to see them as the aggressors, then that could kind of fit right in.
Right.
But they didn't do any of that. You know, it's really universally stupid, too, to kind of attack a vastly advanced alien race that's been at it for, millions of years.
Right. Well, it's not very good common sense. No.
But it goes to show like the stupidity of some of these people in charge. But the fear, the secret, and the fear, especially the fear. But the secret space program. This is where Corey Goode came out, because he was a member of one of these programs, and he said I don't remember how many of the big ones there are. There's 5 or 7 or like that.
Yeah, well, he was talking about that there were several different corporations that are present in space, that have their own space presence.
Yeah, and they're breakaway from even the government. So they're part of a secret government. They're part of a breakaway programs, and they're corporations that have developed these craft, mostly from found and recovered UFOs. And then when that happened, they also started working with some of the ETs to develop it further.
Well, and there's a lot of stuff in the 50s and 60s. There was a lot of exposed government, work on all sorts of different devices using different transportation and magnetized, repulsion, and then all of a sudden it just stopped. There's nothing after that. So anyone who thinks that those experiments did not continue to develop, it's like what Stephen Greer says: if it's got nuts and bolts, we made it. If it doesn't, we didn't. And we are making these ships as well.
Yeah. It's if you look at the information that is out there, and this is only the public stuff,
right?
Me having a little bit of a technical background, studying some physics and some engineering, I can look at these and put the pieces together and look at and going, okay, well, this is way back in the 50s, or this is way back in the 20s, and they had this understanding of things back then.
Right.
If you put all the pieces together from all of these different areas, it becomes very obvious that they have significant advances in anti-grav technology and some of these other things that they've been talking about. One of the former CEOs of Skunkworks, which is, I don't remember if Skunkworks is Boeing or Lockheed Martin. Boeing, Skunkworks. Oh, Boeing. I can't remember. One of them, either Lockheed Martin or Boeing, but one of the former CEOs has said, it's like, if you can dream it, we've done it. And he very much alludes to the fact that, yes, they've built craft in an interview. And he's like, I can't talk about everything that we've done, but if you can think it, if you can dream it, if you can imagine it, then we've done it. And he puts this little ring, and this is how he's alluding to it. He has this ring of wire, and it's hooked into a plug, and he just plugs it into a wall, and it begins to float off the table. And he's like, this is child's play. This is just a little piece of what to think about. This goes into a much larger picture. And so, I mean, these are things that I think that interview was a long time ago. I don't know if it was in the 80s or whatever, but it was a long time ago. But we don't really talk about a lot of that stuff anymore, but some of the more modern technology that's coming out, if you put those pieces together, it's obvious still that there's a lot of things kept from us.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And, I personally have encounter experiences. So I know that these things, the ETs are real, the UFO phenomena is real. Greer talks about there's a difference between what most people think of as abduction experiences and actual factual ETs coming and visiting. And he said most of the fear-based abductions are actually humans within the secret space program,
right?
That are coming to do experiments on people, and so yeah.
And to keep people afraid, to keep people reactive, to keep people closed, to keep people, easily influenceable. We have a lot of that going on in our media right now.
Right.
We have that not only in relationship to how we view space and how we view aliens, but how we view each other.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that again goes back into that Project Bluebeam. Mm-hmm. So, Corey Goode, see, you got me doing it again. Corey Goode, some of the things he's talking about is that the secret space program, they've broken away from the government. They've broken away from even the factions, and there's defectors in pretty much every sector of the secret space programs. In every single one, there's defectors that's come to unify to say, enough is enough. We want the truth revealed. We want something different. And one of the big things he talks about, in addition to like some of the history and all the things that he's learned and he's known about, and being in the program, seeing structures on Mars and the moon, and some of these other things, he talks about these sphere beings that have showed up, and they showed up in the 80s, I think it was. There was one that showed up in the 80s. And members of the secret space program went out there and told them to leave. They said, leave, we don't want you here. And they did. And but then they returned more recently. It was after 2012. And they showed up, and there's hundreds of them.
He said that he'd been communicating with them for about 4 or 5 years now.
Right.
Before they started asking him to be a representative.
Oh, okay.
To speak for them. One of the things he also said was that the sphere beings have come and done this sort of intervention with humanity, I want to say 3 other times. Mm-hmm. And that each time they did this where they picked a human to be a representative and speak for them and work with humanity on a large scale, it turned into a religious movement.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is what we do. We turn things into religion. It's kind of like in that, which one was it? One of the newer Star Trek movies where it opens and, Kirk is running, and he's running from these, from the villagers, and he's got the sacred scroll, and, he's running and, and he leaps off, and then the Enterprise comes up out of the ocean and beams him in, and it zooms away. And all of a sudden now all these people, they cast aside their religious scrolls that they were just chasing him for, and they start drawing the Enterprise, and they start drawing, and now they're worshiping this. Well, that's kind of like what we are.
Yeah.
We're kind of like, we get a glimpse of, and then we try to understand, and we end up creating this whole religion based on this minuscule understanding that still continues to serve our own needs.
It's kind of like, it kind of reminds me of something else that I heard, I don't remember where, but in relationship, like human beings on Earth, we live such short lives compared to the rest of the civilizations out there. Right. And didn't used to be that way, but we live such short lives, and because of that, it stunts our spiritual growth. Mm-hmm. And
we keep having to start over.
Right. Well, we have to come back in multiple lifetimes to gain our spiritual growth, which is really confusing for looking from person to person, because most of us aren't informed that there's even other lives. Right. So you look at the person and think that they must have gained all their growth in their individual lifetimes, when it's really spanned many lifetimes. Yeah. And that's what's necessary for the growth. But they kind of look at us like spiritual children. Right. We're going through this
I kind of look at us like spiritual children.
I kind of do too. But most of humanity is like spiritual children.
Yeah. Not a bad thing, just a thing. No, just where we are.
It just is. And so kind of like sometimes how children go through this phase of not doing anything that the parents want them to do, or they go through this
trying
phase
to prove that their parents are stupid.
And then they go through this phase of idolization, right? And so that can be like looked at as like how these this worshiping, this religion came out of this information. It's not how it's meant to be, and because they're really meant to come into a place of empowerment, where we begin to truly know ourselves. And we come into this place, we're going to start living, we're already starting to live longer.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point, coming into our own power, starting to live longer, starting to think about things in a different way, starting to really develop that other sense about ourselves, but really take our power back and not be dismayed or led astray by all the illusions out there that we've bought into.
Well, it's I know I keep referencing movies, but I think this is a question that humanity has been trying to grapple with for a long time and understand. There's a great movie, The Life of Brian by Monty Python. I don't know if you saw it. It's an old one. But
I'm not sure how this relates to...
Because Brian, there's a part, where Brian is walking along and he gets frustrated and he's speaking out against cruelty or against some aspect. I can't remember exactly what. And somebody hears him and they're like, oh, that dude's got it all figured out. It's right on. And so they start following him. And he's like, quit following me. Why are you following me? And they're taking off their shoes. And he's like, but I lost my shoes. And they're like, well, no, you don't wear shoes. Oh, Brian said not to wear shoes. Oh, we never wear shoes. No, we don't do it. And so all these people start following Brian around as though he's a religious leader and worshiping and idolizing everything about him except for what he's really trying to say, which is quit following me. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to live my life here. And that's what we tend to do. Even for me, yes, I get some answers that other people aren't getting. You get answers that other people aren't getting because we tune in a different way and we're making it our focus and our purpose. And I have people treat me like they get idolizy with me. And I'm like, no, don't. I'm just a mouth. I'm just a mouth that's open and that's having some stuff come through. I'm like, I'm not better than you. Oh, yes, you're so great at what would you do and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no. That's the whole point. Stop idolizing each other and just start thinking and feeling and breathing, and don't look to somebody else to find the answers and the solutions. Look to the other people for inspiration to find your own answers and your own solutions. And that's one of the things, like listening to Corey Goode when he's speaking. I've been looking and researching this topic for a long time. It's always been very fascinating to me. And he put all these pieces that I've been like, this little piece over here, or this little piece here. He puts it all together and he brings it all into a system. And you're like, oh, right, of course. There has to be a grand design going on here. It's not just random UFOs coming in. It's not just random missiles that are being disarmed by UFOs. It's not just bases that are being attacked. There's a whole thing going on. There is a war going on that we are not aware of. And it's all about money. It's all about money and control and not losing it. Because the second that we start going, oh, you mean there's a whole other civilization out there that believes in a whole other way of interacting with each other instead of just blowing each other up all the time?
Well, why don't we have free energy? Why don't we have all the things that they have? If we're interacting, then what's kept us from that?
Why don't we have a moneyless society?
Yeah, and they talk about like their societies out there are moneyless. They don't live off of any kind of exchange. They live off of like a community sharing,
and everyone working and living to their fullest potential.
Right. You don't have to. You're not born into debt.
Right.
You automatically have value.
You don't die in debt.
Right.
You're not paying a death tax, or rather, your family isn't paying it for you.
Right.
Right.
It's like that meme. I think it was you posted the meme.
I don't know.
It's like there was something came out that was like the world is so many trillions of dollars in debt.
Oh, right.
And I was like,
who are we in debt to?
Saturn?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Ridiculous amount of debt the world is in. Yeah.
I mean, who are you in debt to? They made a joke of it as Saturn, but like when you really think about it, we are in debt to somebody. Somebody. And it's been purposely orchestrated that way.
Right.
And we've been made to follow it and agree to it and made to think that that's the best way to go.
Right.
Tying all this in, there's 147 corporations that run the world and that have ties to what did I think? It was like 90, I don't remember the percentage, but it was like the vast majority of everything, at least 80% from what I remember, is owned by 147 corporations. And then, you got to think that there's somebody at the top of each one of those corporations. So it's a very small percentage of people that actually have this significant influence on our society. And it's all because we live by this monetary system. So as much as people think that capitalism is the way to go because it gets them what they want, it also takes away from a lot of other things. So there's a downside to it. There's the deforestation for profit. There's the dumping of all this consumerism in Africa, where they have miles and miles of garbage that we've just dumped over there, and we get away with it. It's not legal to dump garbage, but we get away with it from labeling it repurposed electronics or recycled electronics. So we have all these things that we do that are really not good for society, or not good for us. If we made our phones, for instance, how many phones that we just use and throw away, and it's like you just get a new one and it gets dumped, and that's some of the stuff that gets dumped over there. If we made it more like where you have a case and you can reuse your case and change out the electronics, or just it's not built to fail, it might be a different story.
There was actually a company that made a modular phone that was kind of like that, where you can plug in what aspects you want your phone to have, and then you can replace those individual plug-in parts. And it did not take off because the other part is we've become complacent as a culture. We're very, very complacent. We want it to work, and we want it in our hand now. We don't want to know how. We don't want to know why. We don't want to know where it came from. We don't want to know, how far has this phone traveled from where it was manufactured. We don't want to know how much was the laborer paid who made this phone for me. We don't want to know any of those things. We just want our stuff. We want our toys. And we've become a culture that's very distracted. We're distracted. And I was just with my husband the other day. We were on a little vacation, and I watched TV for the first time in a really long time, where it's like actually on TV, not something on Netflix or YouTube or whatever.
Commercials.
Oh my gosh. The commercials. They're horrible.
They're horrible.
And all of them were drug commercials. So if you watch TV, you're sick and you're dying, and go take a whole bunch more meds. Go take a whole bunch more meds, and and then you can sue somebody because, this drug was recalled. And if you've been inhibited, negatively impacted by this drug, then come with us and we're going to sue the crap out of those guys.
It doesn't make any sense.
Makes no sense at all.
If you really think about it, like, here, take this drug. If you have a side effect, let's sue. If you take this drug, and there's not quite as many like a lawsuit commercials as there are drugs, but there's a lot.
There was like 3 drug commercials and 1 lawsuit commercial and 1 other commercial per commercial break. It was shocking.
Right.
It was shocking. I had not seen anything like that. And I don't pay much attention to that. And, but we some other stuff that Corey talks about, where he talks about how, he talks about how there's the military organization level of the secret government, where it's under control as far as the humans are saying. But then he also talks about how there's even rebel groups of them that have separated out and are doing their own activities. So it's like humans now we're enough installed in space that we are also rebelling against the secret space programs.
Well, that's what he said that he's a part of. He's part of the rebellion that just said that enough is enough. We're going to break away from them and form our own group because we've had enough. What they're doing is wrong. And so that's what he's a part of, and that's also why he was chosen. Well, him in particular, because he's not going to distort the truth. He's not going to distort the information he's given. And he was chosen by one of the blue avian beings.
Raw-tier air.
Raw-tier, as he calls them. So I think it's, why is this all coming out now? And why is this important for people to listen to? I think that's a good thing to think about. And it's one of the things you mentioned is that, we just mentioned a second ago, is that it's all about the technology and then the power. Because once we have our power back, and this is why many alternative energy inventors have been they've been made to disappear. They've been killed. They've been bought out. And there's over 6,000, I don't remember the exact number, but there's well over 6,000 patents that's been classified by the U.S. government. And a lot of them are are energy technologies. Why is a simple energy technology classified? It doesn't really make any sense. But that's the reason. And so the other thing to look at, and I think WIlcock talked a little bit about this, is that disclosure is imminent.
Yeah.
And disclosure is on the brink of happening.
Right.
You see it all throughout the little news articles that are being given and shared everywhere. And it's like
we have countries disclosing now.
Well, yeah, we've had countries disclosing.
We have Canada, we have Brazil. There's some other European countries that have released their documents. Yeah, that say we are working with aliens. I think Canada said that they'd work with 250 some odd species of aliens.
Well, to be clear, I don't think it was Canada as a country.
It was the defense minister.
It was the former defense
minister.
Yeah, and he said disclosure and the manipulation and the lies, all the conspiracy, it's real.
Yeah, Paul Hellyer was his name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's all sorts of scientists who've come out over the years who've talked about working with aliens in designing technology down in New Mexico and in Arizona and Colorado. And I was talking with a woman who I work with, and her father in the 50s was a rocket engineer. He worked on designing the injection system for the fuel for the rockets for the lunar landers. And, he would come home from work and he'd have paper on the table and he would draw pictures of the aliens he'd been working with for his kids to see. So they knew what they looked like. And he would tell them, you're going to hear some, like when the Roswell crash happened, he came home and he told his kids, you guys are going to hear a whole bunch of crap on the, news and people at school, but don't believe it. All of what you're hearing is not true. It really was an alien ship and we shot it down and it hadn't crashed and we kept the people, and he talked about all of that. And it's been a long time coming, this disclosure. And I think that, the idea that humanity is going to be terrified if it comes out, that it's going to, break down society. Well, yeah, it will break down some parts of society, and it's going to be the illusions that are keeping us locked in and keeping us afraid.
Yeah, and some of these religions are going to have to, their idealisms are going to change.
Even the Vatican has now released that they believe there's UFOs. I mean, the Vatican. The Pope says there's aliens. Like, whoo.
I think there was a question like, what are you gonna say to the aliens? It's like, well, I'm gonna save them. They need to be saved. I'm
gonna introduce them to Christ.
Come on.
Oh, that's so cute.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's like the child saying, I'm right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's just like how they saved all the Native Americans and Southern Americans.
Right. Clearly,
they were saved. Oh, man. Ooh.
Yeah, there's been other too. There was a British hacker by the name of Gary McKinnon.
Oh,
yeah. He also tapped into some government documents talking about non-terrestrial officers and fleet-to-fleet transfers. So yeah, he was another whistleblower that they labeled as a terrorist.
We really like that word.
They do.
They really do. They want everyone to be terrorists.
It's become this catchword that how they get away with everything. And of course, they have solid evidence to back it up.
Yeah. Well, and again, it really all boils down to money, control, and fear. If you find yourself wanting to think, oh, maybe there is, but no. Well, ask yourself, why would they not want you to know about it? Why would they be hiding this from you? They're hiding it because it takes away their power and control. And we use the they, right? The term of the they. It's been around forever. And who is they? Like, I get that asked a lot. Well, who's the they?
Yeah, who is they?
Who is they? Who is they, Brandon?
Well, 147 corporations, breakaway civilizations, people after power, control, and
yeah, there's a big group of them.
Yeah, there's more than one.
Yeah, and I think that the biggest thing is addressing your fear. Address your fear, and start again. Apply your common sense. Use some of your discerning skills that you've learned with other humans, and start thinking about what do you want your world to look like, because you really can control how it looks and what's going on around you. Personally, I've believed in a secret government for a very, very long time. And look at me, I'm fine.
Right.
I fit in fine with culture. I can go to any event and function, and I'm fine. Nobody thinks I'm crazy.
Well, if you do a lot of research about legitimate documents,
right,
legitimate, real, declassified documents where there's all those black lines everywhere, the parts that you do see, they're very telling.
Right.
You have to literally read between the lines, but it's very telling. And you have to put the whole picture together on both like what the government's spending on. They spent more money on advertising the war and public opinion than they did actually on the wars. So there's a real reason that they go in and try to paint something one way. But if you read between the lines and like the whole big picture, it makes a completely different image of what most people think they're seeing. There's also going back to like the disclosure and like how do we know it's real? Like how do we know any of this is real? Secret space program. There's been NASA images, many NASA images of craft, and there's just so many that they released to the public that's obviously been photoshopped. I saw one.
And images of the moon that have been photoshopped.
Oh, yeah, that's clear.
And there's interviews with women who worked in the censoring department for NASA that would go through and hand paint out, back in the day when that was what they did, the bases and the ships. And
with very bad Photoshop.
Very
because
bad.
It was not so advanced back then.
Right.
Yeah. And it's clear that it's been modified. So one of the things Corey talked about is that there has been a war in space, a secret space war for a very long time. One of the satellite images, where there's images from the space station, you can actually see two of these UFOs, these little beams of light, fighting. Like one came around and another one came up, and then you saw like some sort of projectile come out from that, and the other one missed, and then that one that it missed, it zoomed off, and so there definitely has been some sort of space conflict, and it's been recorded and captured. So those are some things to look at. The other thing, as far as like disclosure being imminent, and like I really strongly believe like by 2030 we're going to have full disclosure like within that time frame, because like right now they've been releasing things like there's been bugs found on this outside of the space station.
Far out.
So there's like, nothing can survive in space, and that's been the idealism that most people have been sold to kind of keep this illusion that nothing can survive and we're all alone, this miracle rock in the middle of nowhere, the only sentient life in the universe possibly. That's been sold to us by reinforcing the idea that nothing can survive out there. But they're now releasing like, there's been bugs on the side of the space station. I think it was actually an Earth bug that happened to be out there. Or at least that's what you're saying. But it happened to be on the side.
It's a cockroach. Roaches in space.
I think it was some sort of mite or something like that. But it was living.
Well, even they've done experiments where they've collected space dust, and the space dust has basic ribonucleic acid, the building blocks of DNA. So we know that all kinds of things are surviving out there.
Well, yeah, you can charge that with extremely high voltage, and things will start growing out of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, so that obviously. Electricity happens in space. That's what we're getting from the sun.
Right.
There's all these electromagnetic waves and stuff. So there's that. There's other things that they're thinking there might be finding microbes on Mars and other areas, and so they're releasing all this information.
Or that spider crab thing they found on Mars.
Yeah, yeah. So they're releasing all this information bit by bit to kind of prime us for the idea that life is out there.
I think you can also look at what's coming out of Hollywood.
Oh yeah, Hollywood is always a good example because a lot of these movies are molded and primed for us to start accepting things, and you know it's always been like with the times of society as the types of movies and the kind of like the general attitudes coming out in Hollywood.
Yeah, well, like we had all these, comet destroying movies, comet and asteroid hitting us movies, and then we find out that we narrowly avoid, really because of a solar blast of some sort, we avoid a big comet destroying us. Or we have all the outbreak movies or zombie movies, or everyone's sick and dying of some unknown disease, and then we have outbreaks of swine flu and avian bird flu, and it's like there are always these.
Well, there's more to that story too.
Well, of course, there always is, but we are primed by our media.
Right.
If you want to, like, we have right now, our current obsession in media is superheroes. Why? Because people kind of are getting superpowers. We are getting telepathy. We are getting, the ability to see in different timelines. We are beginning to awaken.
It shows like Sense8, which I love.
I know. That's a great show. But, and even Heroes, Heroes is coming back again. And we have all of these retake look at superheroes. Like right now there's, The Flash, or there's, what was some of the other ones? I can't think of them right now, but there's quite a few of these shows that are coming out right now. Daredevil, where they're kind of, they have a superhero power, but it's like, it's just this extra human power. It's this extra sensory power. And that's because we are developing these gifts. We are starting to develop these gifts and shifting ourselves. So they are starting to talk about that in our popular media. And you are going to see more and more of that, I think.
The funny thing about Daredevil is there's actually a real human that was like that.
There are several, actually, that use the echolocation and that are able to sense things based on their proprioceptive skills.
Of course, the real people we're talking about didn't go out and fight crime, but
exactly. Exactly. So, I do think that there's, we do have this fear around, the conspiracy. We dismiss so much as conspiracy theory because it is overwhelming when you look at the whole picture. Right. If you haven't been looking for a while.
And it can be very frightening for people to look at something that's going to change their entire paradigm. Their whole world will be shattered if they accept this truth.
Right.
And what does that mean for them? And for some people, especially those who really need to be in control and feel like they have control.
Right.
If there is a vastly superior civilization out there, they are no longer in control. If the government is doing what everybody says it's doing and the conspiracy theories are true, that means they are no longer in control and safe. And for them, it's really a matter of safety. And so there's going to be a lot of those too. And there's a lot of those now. I've dealt with people in my life that will refuse to believe, no matter what I show him, he refused to believe that there could be possibly any kind of intelligent life out there.
Yeah. Well, it also kind of brings into point, like, other movie like District 9. We had like a movie come out like that where, yes, we've been invaded by an alien species, and what did we do to them? We put them in a slum. We isolated them.
Right.
We, treat them as totally different when they're really just trying to get some other way of, getting home. So
we treated them like we treat each other. Exactly.
So you and I've talked about this a lot before, where when we it's almost like we anthropomorphize them into being human, like having a human reaction or having human desires or drives. And it's not to say that aliens don't have what we would consider negative drive.
Talk about projections, right?
But exactly.
Talk about projections.
We assume that they're going to come here
and they're going to destroy
all of us.
Yeah. The worst of what's in us.
Right, exactly. This idea that they're going to take over the world. Like, well, that's absurd. It's absurd, because why would they come all the way here just to take over this world? And
And if you've been paying attention and looking at all the evidence, they've been here for a very long time.
Very long time. Yeah.
A very long time. And why would it change now?
Right.
The thing that they seem to be worried about is us getting out of control, because we're out of control on our own planet.
Right.
There's been war, chaos, killing each other, like children fighting amongst themselves.
Over money, land,
over money,
religion, love.
Imaginary concepts, right? These fictitious concepts and things that they're not even tangible. Sometimes it has been tangible, like you said, money or land and food. That's we're out of that era.
Resources. Well, not really.
Well,
there are still places where we're fighting over resources and land, but
it doesn't need to be that way.
No, it doesn't need to be. No.
If we have more than enough food to feed the world, despite without the GMOs. That's been proven. And if we united as a people, as a global community, we have more than enough to do everything that we need to do to survive in harmony. But how do we get there? We're not going to get there in an harmonious way if we allow them to control the outcome and dictate how we unite. And that's what they've been trying to do. They wanted to control the outcome where they still maintain the power and then unite the world. But, we don't need them to do that. And it's essential that we don't allow them to have the control to do that. And that's why we need, as a people, to take back our power, because essentially everybody wants the same thing. Nobody really wants war. Nobody really wants to be at odds with each other. Most people are seeking love and harmony in their own lives, in their own communities. And that's pretty much the unified truth, no matter where you go in the world.
So as an individual, if you want to start trying to understand all of this more, first of all, research. Start doing some research. Start educating yourself. Let go of the idea that it's all conspiracy theory, and let all of it just be theory that you're exploring. And start researching. And the other thing is, like Dr. Stephen Greer talks about, doing meditation prepares your consciousness for having the interactions, to have interactions with these species. A lot of people tell me, I'm not going to believe in aliens till I'm shaking one's hand. Well, get yourself ready for it then.
Right. Get yourself mentally, emotionally, and spiritually prepared, and whatever the way that means to. There was a great email that I got from Anelia Benz that talks about etiquette for interacting with other beings. And she talks about not idolizing them as this superior being, but looking at them as equals. Energetically speaking, she said many of them are far more advanced than most of us. And it's also not about like sending them, like showering them with your love, because she said some of them, it feels like an unwanted kiss from a stranger. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
But there's etiquette and things to go about it, and just really start contemplating what it would be like for you. Most people would be freaked out, honestly, because they haven't been prepared.
Right.
And even people that have thought they've prepared themselves enough, when it comes down to the situation where they're about to meet them.
Oh, that scares the pants off me.
Right.
I try not to be afraid.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid. I am not afraid.
But it's okay if you are,
Right.
Don't shove it down and pretend it's not there, but just recognize what is there, and then make steps accordingly to prepare yourself in whatever way you need to do.
Yeah.
Because, this truth is coming.
And talk about it. Don't hide all the stuff away. The more that we're talking about it, like for instance, I talk with people about, feeling like I'm being contacted by aliens, feeling like I'm having conversations with them in my meditations or my experiences. I talk with my friends about that, and I'm blown away when they share the experience with me. They're like, oh my God, I had that same dream.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, I had that same experience, or I had that thought run through my head, or I thought I saw something. If we aren't talking about it, we're just sitting in silence thinking we're the crazy ones.
Right.
And the reality is many of us are sharing these experiences. And what I hear most from people is that I feel all alone. Well, all of you who are listening, you're not alone, because you're all listening to us talk about the same things, because it coincides with something that you experience.
Right.
So the more you talk to each other, the more you'll find you're not so alone.
Yeah, I didn't talk about my experiences for many years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just
me neither.
Just for that reason, like I
was already labeled as crazy.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I wasn't, but I didn't want that label, so
right.
I avoided that.
Yeah.
Did you ever see that commercial that was down in it was somewhere in South America, where it was an alien boy going to school?
Oh, yeah.
That was another interesting thing. It was talking about acceptance, accepting as outsiders, accepting of people that are different from you. Mm-hmm. And there's this like clearly alien boy going to school and other boys are picking on them. And
mm-hmm. Until he does something cool with telekinesis or something like that.
Yeah. And then they accepted him. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I thought that was very interesting as well.
Yeah. And telling. Look at what's being produced by our media. Uh-huh. That's what we're slowly being, taught to accept.
I think it was some sort of government commercial too.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much our conversation for today on the Secret Space Program. We would love to hear about what you guys have found in your own research
or your own experiences. Mm-hmm. Feel free to see this as an outlet for sharing some of your own experiences. Mm-hmm. And we'd love to even possibly have you on the show if you're interested in that.
For sure. Yeah. So you can either private message either Brandon or I on Facebook, or you can join. We have our discussion group, the Crystal Cocoon, on Facebook, as well as the page. So those two are two different spaces. The discussion group is really a place we hope that you all feel comfortable and confident sharing whatever you're interested and curious to talk about. Or you can also email us with your stories or your interest in talking with us as well at thecrystalcocoon@gmail.com. And you can listen to other episodes if you enjoyed this on YouTube or Libsyn or iTunes at The Crystal Cocoon. And remember, share the show with your friends, and let's get people talking, and let's break down these barriers of fear and control. And we're all crazy. Let's share it. I'm sharing my crazy.
Well, thanks for sharing.
You're welcome. Have a great week.